Hello, welcome to Current Study IQ. Today we'll be talking about chapter 3 of class 12 psychology book, and chapter 3 for class 12 psychology book is meeting life challenges. So we'll be discussing about a lot of important questions in the chapter, and we'll be going through like lot of stuff. So you just sit with your pencils and a paper, just mark the important questions. We'll be discussing the important questions also, and if you have any further doubts in regard to this chapter, you can put your questions in the comment section, and we'll make sure to answer each of your questions. Thank you. So starting with chapter 3, meeting life challenges. So, first, we'll be talking about what exactly the nature, types, and sources of stress are, which is here. So, all challenges, problems, and difficult circumstances put us to stress. Thus, if handled properly, stress increases the probability of one's survival. So a little bit of stress in life is okay, and during any kind of before any kind of examination you feel certain amount of stress. So that particular amount of stress which is making you do something, which is making you more attentive, which is increasing your concentration and which is making you more alert, is a good amount of stress. And if that threshold gets crossed and there are like people feel so stressed in some situations that they feel very helpless and they don't know how to overcome from those stressful situations. So we'll be talking about the types of stress, what stress is, how to deal with stress, and what happens, what are the causes of stress, and everything in this chapter. So, the important term over here is eustress. So, eustress is the term used to describe the level of stress that is good for you and is one of a person's best asset for achieving peak performance and managing minor crisis. That is eustress. However, has the potential of turning into distress. So it is later manifestation of stress that causes our bodies wear and tear. Thus, stress can be described as, now mark down the definition for stress which you can write further. So, the pattern of responses an organism makes to stimulus event that disturbs the equilibrium and exceeds a person's ability to cope. So what is stress? The pattern of responses an organism make to stimulus event that disturbs the equilibrium and exceeds a person's ability to cope. So now we'll be talking about nature of stress. So here you can see like how, like what's the origin, from where it was derived, and everything. So this passage will tell you about those things. Now we'll have how Hans Sele described. I don't know the correct pronunciation. You can check the pronunciation of this word. So he's known as the father of modern stress research. He defines stress as the non-specific response of the body to any demands, that is regardless of the cause of the threat. The individual will respond with the same psychological pattern or reaction. So this was his definition for stress. You can note this down as this is important. Now we'll jump here. It is a disruption in homeostasis or an imbalance that gives rise to a requirement or resolution of that imbalance or restoration of homeostasis. Then we have the perception of stress is dependent upon the individual's cognitive appraisal of events and the resources available to deal with them. Now it depends about the on the person how he or she is perceiving stress, and at the moment and on the situation what all other resources present like available to that person to cope up with stress. Now we have a cognitive theory of stress propounded by Lazarus and his colleagues. So we'll see what he has described in figure 3.2, which is on next page. But before that, we'll read about the causes. So there are many internal and external causes of stress. So the variables, the stimulus which make you result in stress are called stressors. So there are stressors and there are external stressors. Okay. Then we have internal state, which can be biological, like you have some migraine problem or you have some respiratory problem, so that can be a biological. Then we have psychological reaction, sorry, we have biological and psychological reaction leading to stress experience, like your coping mechanisms and your defense mechanisms you're using to avoid a stressful situation or something like that. So these reactions can be biological, that oh, you have your headache or something like that. Many of the people feel a very tingling feeling in their stomach before any presentation, so that is your biological reaction. Or you have some psychological reaction which can be usage of any defense mechanism, right? Then we have result, which is stress reaction. So what comes in this category is challenge to overcome or illness or strain. Now, have we discussed about the strain? Okay, let me. Okay, so what is strain? The reaction to external stressor is called strain. Like your reaction towards a external stressor is known as strain. So that is what is explained here. Now we have, so Lazarus has distinguished between two type of appraisal. First is your primary appraisal, and second is your secondary appraisal. So primary appraisal refers to the perception of new changing environment as positive, neutral, negative in its consequences. Negative events are appraised for their possible harm, threat, or challenges. So, harm is the assessment of the damage that has already been done by an event. There can be a question asking you what is harm, like how would you define harm? So, we have now, uh, yeah, so threat is the assessment of possible future damage that may be brought about by a event. Like what is threat? So it's an assessment about the possible future damage. You are threatened by a future damage which may happen and may not happen even. So challenge appraisals are associated with more confident expectations of the ability to cope with the stressful event. Now when we perceive an event as stressful, are likely to make a secondary appraisal, so which is the assessment of one's coping ability and resources and whether be sufficient to meet the harm, threat, or challenge of the event. So in primary appraisal, we discussed about harm, we discussed about challenge, we discussed about threat. So, what happens in secondary appraisal, which is the assessment of one's coping ability and resources and whether they will be sufficient to meet the harm, threat, or challenge of the event. That is, um, these resources may be mental, physical, personal, or social. So, it depends what these resources are. So, they can be your personal, physical, or social. So, this two level appraisal process determines not only our cognitive and behavioral responses, but also our emotional and physiological responses to external event. Now we have what is past experience. These appraisals are very subjective and dependent on many factors, and which is one past experience that is dealing with such stressful condition if one has handled the similar situation long back. So that is your past experience that you have handled that particular situation back before, and then you know how to handle that situation. So we will discuss about these things. So this particular figure is basically a summary of the whole chapter. So this is very important. Don't memorize the whole table, but this table will initially will let you know what are stressors, then what are the types of stressors, their dimension, then persons, characteristics. So all these things come in this particular table, and this is basically a summary of your whole chapter if you're going to deal with this in detail. So there, if we discuss here, then there are stressors. So there are three types of stressors. One is environmental, psychological, and social. So and then we have dimension, like the intensity of like the intensity of the stress, low intensity versus high intensity, like the duration, whether it is short or long duration. Then we have complexity, which is like less complex or very much complex, and predictability, unpredictable. You were not aware, it happens all of a sudden, or you could predict, okay, now there will be a stressful situation. If we talk about the physiological level, then I'll read it. Yeah. So physiological level is like arousal plays a key role in stress related to behavior. So that is your physiological can have your um okay, we are not talking about physiological over here. We are talking about types of stressors. Yeah. So we have types of stress. So there are three major type of stress: physical, environmental, and psychological. And it can be at social also. So physical and environmental stress are physical stresses are demands that change the state of our body. We feel strained when we over exert ourselves physically. So that is your physical woe. And environmental stresses are aspects of our surrounding that are often unavoidable, such as air pollution, a lot of noise pollution. So that is environmental stress. Then we have psychological stress. Psychological stresses is that we generate ourselves in our minds. So these are personal and unique to person experiencing them, and are internal sources of stress. We worry about problems, feel anxiety, or become depressed. So these are not the symptoms of stress, but they can cause further stress for us. Like anxiety, if you're too much anxious about any particular event, you may feel stressed out later in the situation. So, some of the important sources of physiological, psychological stress are frustration, conflict, internal, and social pressures. So, these all things are here. We have talked about intensity, duration, complexity, predictability. Then we have signs and symptoms of stress. What I am talking about is frustration results from blocking of needs. Remember, motives by something or someone that hinders us from achieving a desired goal. So, how does frustration arrives when your needs are being blocked? So, just remember, just relate frustration, blocking of needs is frustration. Conflict may occur between two or more incompatible needs or motives. That is conflict. Then we have internal pressures. So, stem from beliefs based upon expectations from inside ourselves, such as I must do everything perfectly. That is your internal pressure. Then we have social pressure that may be brought about from people who make excessive demands from us. That is your social pressure, like which is like around your society and everything. Then we have social stress. So, social stress is from our interaction with other people. Social events like death, illness in the family, strained or some strained relationship, trouble with neighbors, or some examples of social stresses are these. Okay, this is your social stress. Now we have some sources of stress. What are sources of stress? So some life event, suppose like changes, which is like big or small, and a sudden gradual effect, uh, uh, sudden and gradual effect affect our life from moment we are born. So this is some like your breakup from a long term relationship or something, you are changing some life event, can be any like major loss in the family, it can be economical, it can be personal, something like that. So this is your life event. Then we have hassles. So these are personal stresses we endure as individuals due to happenings in our daily lives, like noisy surroundings, commuting. Then you have quarrelsome neighbors, then electricity and water shortage. So these are the factors which may lead to stress, or some traumatic event, like you have witnessed a very bad earthquake, you have witnessed a robbery in the house or kidnapping. So these are the traumatic events which may lead to long term stress. Then we have effects of stress on psychological and psychological functioning and health. So, so there are four major effects of stress associated with stressed state, which is emotional, physiological, cognitive, and behavioral. Now, what is emotional effect? Those who suffer from stress are far more likely to experience mood swings. Some examples are already given in the box. Then like there's a lot of mood swings, there is like your confidence level decreases, then you're not emotionally confident enough, you don't behave emotionally well. That is your emotional effect. Then we have physiological effect. When the human body is placed under physical or psychological stress, it increases the production of certain hormones, such as adrenal, adrenaline, adrenaline, and cortisol. So these hormones produce marked changes in heart rate, blood pressure levels, metabolism, and physical activities. Then we have cognitive effect. So if the pressure due to stress continue or may suffer from mental overload, the suffering from high level of stress can rapidly cause individuals to lose their ability to make sound decisions. Then we have behavioral effect. That is, stress affects our behavioral in a form of eating less nutritional food, increasing intake of stimulants such as caffeine, excessive consumption of cigarette, alcohol, and other drugs. So this can be a behavioral thing also under stress. Then we have now we will read about what is burnout. So, the state of physical, emotional, and psychological exhaustion is burnout. So, burnout is important. Keep a tap of it. I would like to give you 2 minutes to read the whole thing once till here, because from here we'll be starting with a new model, which is GAS, known as General Adaptation Syndrome. So, just read till here what we have learned, then we'll proceed from here. Yes. So, what happens to body when stress is prolonged? So, we have discussed what father of stress, father of stress psychology, Sele studied this issue by subjecting animals to a variety of stressors such as high temperature, x-ray, and insulin injection in the laboratory over a long period of time. So he observed patients with various injuries and illness in hospitals. So Sele noticed a similar pattern of bodily response in all forms of them. So he called this pattern as general adaptation syndrome. So, according to him, gas involves three stages: alarm reaction, resistance, and exhaustion. That this is how he explained it. So, what happens in this is very important. So, what happens in alarm reaction stage? So, the presence of noxious stimulus or stressor leads to activation of adrenal pituitary cortex system. This triggers the release of hormones producing the stress response. Now the individual is ready to fight or flight. So once these hormones are alerted, now the individual is either to fight. They have to either to fight the stress or to fly from it, or to flight. So this is what he explained in alarm reaction. To you reach here on this stage, fight or flight after these things are triggered on. Then we have resistance stage. So, if stress is prolonged, the resistance stage begins. The parasympathetic nervous system calls for more cautious use of body's resources. The organism make efforts to cope with the threat as through confrontation. Like if the stress is prolonged, if the stress is being for a long duration, the resistance stage begin. Then the straight stage arises. The parasympathetic nervous system calls for more cautious use of body resources. The organism make efforts to cope with the threat. Now you have to cope with the upcoming threat as through confrontation. Then we have exhaustion stage. Continued exposure to the same stressor or additional stressor drains the body of its resources, leads to the third stage, which is exhaustion, where you are completely drained. The physiological system involves in alarm reaction and resistance becomes ineffective and suspectable. Susceptibility of stress related disease such as high blood pressure becomes more likely. That is your exhaustion stage. Then we have stress and the immune system. Here we they have discussed about the psychoneuroimmunology. What it focuses on the links between the mind. Just hold on, my cursor is not. So, psychoneuroimmunology focuses on the links between the mind, brain, and the immune system. It studies the effect of stress on immune system. The white blood cells, leukocytes within the immune system identify and destroy foreign bodies, which are antigens such as virus. It also leads to the production of antibodies. There are several kinds of white blood cells or leukocytes within the immune system, including T cells, B cells, and natural killers. So, what T cells destroys invaders, T T helpers cell increases immunological activity. It is these T helpers that attacked by the human immunodeficiency virus, which is HIV, the virus causing acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. B cells produce antibodies. These are the natural killers. Involved in the fight against the virus and tumors. Then we have um, see, your relation of stress with illness. You have fear, anger, and hostility. So, which can lead to anger outbursts, throwing tantrums, withdrawal, feeling hopelessness, which is your mental or physical illness, which can lead to your mental and physical illness, weakens your immune system because you're not on proper, you have withdrawal symptoms, you're not on proper diet, and all those things. Then it this thing leads to stress hormones, which we have discussed before, and as those stress hormones releases in your body, your immune system gets weakened. Then we have coping with stress. So, what is coping? This thing is important. What is coping and what are the strategies of coping? So, coping is a dynamic situation specific reaction to stress. It is a set of concrete responses to stressful situations or events that are intended to resolve the problem and reduce stress. What is coping? Coping is a dynamic situation specific reaction to stress. It is a set of concrete responses to stressful situation or events that are intended to resolve the problem and reduce stress. So that is your coping. Then three coping strategies were given by Endler and Parker. One is task oriented. So, this involves obtaining information about the stressful situation and about alternative courses of action and their probable outcomes. For example, schedule my time better, or about how I have solved similar problems. So which is your task oriented. Then we have emotion oriented strategy. This can involve efforts to maintain hope and to control one's emotion. It can involve venting feelings of anger and frustration or deciding that nothing can be done to change things. So that is your emotion oriented. Now we have avoidance oriented strategy. So this involves denying or minimizing the seriousness of situation. It also involves of st- uh, conscious suppression of stressful thoughts and their replacement by self protective thoughts. So that is your three strategies. Now according to them, coping responses can be divided into two. So here we are talking about Lazarus and Folkman. So they have conceptualized coping as a dynamic process rather than individual trait. So, coping refers to constantly changing cognitive and behavioral efforts to master, reduce, or tolerate the internal external demands that are created by the stressful transaction. So, this is important and it was given by Lazarus and Folksman. They said that coping is something which is constantly changing and it depends upon your cognitive and behavioral efforts, that how you're mastering your coping mechanism. So according to them, there were two types of coping mechanism. One is problem focused and another one is emotion focused. So problem focused strategy attack the problem itself. Like you have to focus on the problem with behaviors designed to gain information, to alter the event, or to alter belief and commitments. Like whatever the problem is, suppose the example is I made a plan of action and followed it. That is your problem focus. Okay, this is my particular problem and now I have to figure out the resources to how to solve this problem. Whereas emotion focused strategy calls for psychological changes designed primarily to limit the degree of emotional disruption caused by the event with minimal efforts to alter the event. For example, I did some things to let it out of my system. Like catharsis, you're talking to your friend, you're constantly seeking approvals through your emotional self. That is your emotion focused strategy. Then we have stress management techniques. So I would suggest you to read, because yeah, again, this is important. This can be a part of question. Like this can be a question, like mention about the stress management techniques and talk about them in brief. So first we have your relaxation technique, like your deep breathing, or something which is soothing to you, those relaxation techniques. So it is an active skill that reduces symptoms of decreases the incidence of illness such as high blood pressure. So deep breathing can be a part of this relaxation technique. Then we have a lot of relaxation techniques. other than this also. Then meditation procedure, like yogic method of meditation, so that comes in meditation procedure. Then we have biofeedback, so it is a procedure to monitor and reduce the physiological aspect of stress by providing feedback about current physiological activity, which is accompanied again by some kind of which is again accompanied by some kind of relaxation technique, like controlling your physiological response in a very quiet condition or transferring that control into your conditions every day. Then creative visualization, then CBT. So again, CBT is important in dealing with stress. Then exercise, include a major portion of exercise in your daily routine so that you feel way better. Then we have promoting positive health and well-being. Here we'll start with stress resistant personality. The recent study by Kobasa has shown that people with high level of stress but low level of illness share three characteristics referred as personality traits of hardiness. Now, personality traits of hardiness is a important topic which was given by Kubasa. Personality traits of hardiness. Important. So this consists of three C's: commitment, control, challenge. So, what is hardiness? Hardiness is a set of belief about oneself, the world, and how they interact. It's like you and the world. How these two things interact is your set of, like, you have a how you and the world interact. They have a set of belief, and that is hardiness. So it takes shape as a sense of personal commitment, like your personal commitment towards your work or anything about whatever you are doing. Then you have a sense of control over your life. You have a sense of control over your life, like what you want to do, whether you want to do or whether you don't want to do. And a feeling of challenge, like you have to procure some things, you have to take some resources that is you are challenging enough for yourself and for the world. That is, and the feeling of challenge. So stress resistant personality have control, which is a sense of purpose and direction, commitment to work, family, and hobbies or social life. Then challenges, that is, they see changes in life as normal and positive rather than threat. So this thing is important. Then I would suggest you to read from here. They're talking about the life skills, the abilities or adaptive positive behavior which you can inculcate in your life to avoid the stressful situation. So it involves assertiveness, then improving relationship, self-care, time management, rational thinking, overcoming unhelpful habits, your diet and your exercise. So yes, these things are also important to maintain, to maintain good relationship and to avoid stressful situation. Yes, so we have studied about what is stress, what is the nature of the stress, what are types of stress, how to avoid stress, and how to identify stress. Then we have learned about gas model of stress. We have learned about three things in that particular model. One is alarm reaction. The model is known as General Adaptation Syndrome, GAS, and we studied about three things in that particular model. Then we studied about the coping coping strategies, how many types of coping strategies are there, and what is emotion focused coping and what is problem focused coping. Then we studied about the hormones, which secretion of hormones which leads to stress, and what is psychoneuroimmunology. So we have discussed about all these things in this chapter. And if you have any further questions, you can put it down in the comment section, and I'll be happy to answer all your questions. And I hope this short video was informative enough for you to seek out the important things in this chapter. We did only mention about the important things in this chapter. We did not deal with the chapter in detail because we wanted to keep it very short, and we wanted to only focus on the things which are there, which are coming in your examinations, rather than talking about the whole chapter in detail. So yeah, I hope you liked our video. If you liked our video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We'll keep posting about psychology 11th and 12th, all the chapter discussion, and what else you can learn out of your NCRTs, and what else you can focus on, how what are the career choices and everything. Like, we'll be talking about psychology and the areas related to it in detail. We also post about a lot of other subjects, so you can check out them also if currently you are in your 12th and like you have your upcoming examination. So you can also look out for those things. To do share your videos with do share our videos with your friends if you like them, and do subscribe to our channel and give a big thumbs up. Thank you so much.